How we doing, folks? Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network, and we are bringing you a very special episode, the playoff preview resume special, as we don't have the playoff finalized just yet, but the contenders are in following conference championship week, and we're going to have a discussion on what teams are most likely to get into the playoff. Now, of course, your Pitt Panthers coming off a 24-3 victory over Clemson, a huge win there. Quadri Olson with a pair of touchdown runs. Aaron Matthews also with a catch and run that went for a touchdown from Kenny Pickett. Clemson mustered just a single field goal, and it was really a total defensive performance. You look at Clemson's total offense, 156 yards. 82 yards on the ground. They'd have probably had over 100 if it weren't for the 4 sacks that the Panthers did have. So they ran the ball okay, but passing was just an abysmal effort for them. 74 passing yards, easily the lowest output the Panthers have allowed all season. Clemson was 3 for 15 on third down, and compare it to the way Pitt did, 155 passing yards, only 5 incompletions, no turnovers, and a touchdown. 220 yards on the ground. Steady gain, averaged a little over 4 yards a carry if you do the math there, about 4.5 maybe. Of course, that would be better if Pickett hadn't gotten sacked as well. But good running from the Panthers, 375 yards of total offense, over 50% on third down. They were perfect in the red zone versus Clemson, who was 0 for 1 in the red zone. If you then look at time of possession, the Panthers dominated the play. That's, of course, because Clemson ran like a hurry-up style offense. But overall, just a fantastic performance by Pitt, and Clemson just could do nothing about it. If we look through the player performance, Kenny Pickett, just an efficient performance. 1 touchdown, only had to throw 20 times, but he completed 75% of them for 155 yards, 10-yard average on his completions, and was sacked once. He ran for 19 yards, got a couple first downs when the Panthers need him to. Darren Hall remains to be seen if he'll be able to return this season. He did leave the game with an injury very late. He had 50 yards, buoyed by a 24-yard carry on the Panthers' final drive. And Quadri Olson, 120 yards, 6-yard average, 2 touchdowns. I mean, what can you say about him? It was just an unbelievable performance from him overall. Receiving-wise, Arujo Lopes not going to get the credit that many other guys do on this team, but 3 catches, they were all for first downs, and I believe they were all on third down, if I'm not mistaken. So he had an unbelievable game, picked up a couple of big first downs when we needed him to. French, of course, was very good, as he usually is. Aaron Matthews had the touchdown, which was fantastic. Tipton had 2, Lease had 2, Olsen had 2 as well. So just an overall well-rounded performance by the Panthers. You can see defensively, Barry Jenkins led the way. He was starting for the injured Sean Idowu, who should be back for whatever bowl or playoff scenario we end up playing in. But either way, Barry Jenkins was unbelievable for the Panthers. 7 tackles, 2 for a loss. Great game from him. Sean Wolfgang, 3 sacks. Great performance from him. He's got 15 on the season. He's been an absolute revelation as the sophomore. And that's the big key for the Panthers here, is the new guys they've brought in. Paris Ford's just a sophomore, 6 tackles in his return from injury. Barry Jenkins, 7 tackles. Sean Wolfgang, 5 tackles, 4 for loss, 3 sacks. Keyshawn Camp had a sack. Jason Jordan had 3 tackles, so good performance from him. Getting a lot of playtime as well was the sophomore. So just a great game overall by the Panthers. Interception was DeMar Hamlin. Of course, had a big pick late in the first half as Clemson tried to go for a Hail Mary late on that really could have changed the game. So it's just a great overall game by the Panthers. Jay Bump made his field goal. Eric Fox, not a great average, because usually when we were punting, it was from midfield or even in Clemson territory, but 2 inside the 20. Good net compared to his average, only about 6 yards per return for Clemson, so a good game for him. And then for Clemson, like I mentioned, Kelly Bryant really struggled. 16 of 27. That was just down to the fact that we pressured him well. He didn't make a lot of good decisions, and then he, missed a lot of his downfield throws. And then when he did complete passes, they were typically short underneath and things like that. Rushing-wise, C.J. Fuller had an okay game. Couple of long runs, 4-yard average. Kelly Bryant, if you take away the 4 sacks, he probably ran for like 60-some yards. So they could have maybe continued this little 1-2 rushing attack that they had going. But once they fell behind, they had to try and pass it. They had to try and move the ball, and that just didn't really work out for them. You can see nobody really did anything. Deion Kane, their number 1 receiver, didn't even have a catch. So unbelievable from us in that performance there. Defensively, McDaniel and Joseph had a lot of tackles. Bryant did have a really nice game, 2 tackles for a loss and a sack, but Dexter Lawrence just had 4 tackles. Juergen had 6 tackles, but he didn't have any for a loss, so he wasn't in the backfield at all. He was their leading sack guy. Christian Wilkins had just a single tackle, so we really neutralized them on the defensive line. That allowed our rushing attack to have a great game. Hugo made his field goal, and you can just see the rest of the stats. So overall, a great performance by the Panthers, a huge victory, and you can see around the nation, some games did kind of, fall in our favor. Middle Tennessee State beat UAB 33-28, so a big win for them there to go 12-1. They should make a New Year's Six bowl. Houston did pick up their second loss this season, lost to Cincinnati 26-23. LSU knocked off Tennessee, so they stay unbeaten. They're in the running for potentially the number 1 playoff position. Wyoming and Josh Allen from draftjoshallen.com, 35-28 victory over Nevada. Washington 42-21 over UCLA. And this is a big game for us because Washington probably had the much better resume than UCLA. If UCLA had beat Washington, I think Washington would have had a case to still potentially make the playoff. UCLA has a little bit less of a case because their remaining schedule beyond the Washington game here wasn't very strong, and they lost in arguably their biggest game of the season. Ohio State did beat Nebraska 38-24. So that's a big game for them. They're probably the number 1 contender with us for that 4th playoff position. And Toledo are going to play Ohio. You expect Ohio to win this one. We'll check back in on it once we're able to simulate through the week. I just didn't want to simulate through before being able to see, everybody's ranking as it stands right now. And so with that said, we're going to go ahead, sim through the week, and then we'll look through how everybody ranked overall and give you the preview as far as that's concerned. And there's something to take a look at. Lamar Jackson, the senior out of Louisville, has won the Heisman. 3,331 yards passing, 797 yards rushing, 41 total touchdowns. An unbelievable season from him. Louisville had a very nice year. I think they finished 9-3. They're ranked like 12th or 10th in the country right now. I think they were 12th going into conference championship week. We'll see if they bump up a little bit here going into bowl week. Geis of LSU, the running back, finished 2nd. Hayden Moore, Cincinnati's quarterback, finishes 3rd. Joe Burrow of Ohio State finishes 4th. And Deshaun Kaiser of Notre Dame finishes in 5th. So congratulations, Lamar Jackson, picking up the Heisman. I think the last 3 years have all been really good quarterbacks that have won. J.T. Barrett won our first year of the Dynasty. Deshaun Watson won the second year last year. And now Lamar Jackson wins this year. And you can see we bumped up to 6. If we were doing the normal just BCS bowl structure, we'd be in the Orange Bowl against Middle Tennessee State, interestingly enough. So we get a really high prestige bowl, but we don't get a high prestige opponent. But that would have been fun to play against them. They have some pretty cool black jerseys. But alas, we'll see what transpires here as we talk about the playoff picture. So we quickly look through, like I said, there's Jackson. Great performance. There's the Heisman, where we'll just give you an overview of his stats. 3,331 yards, 34 TDs passing, 7 picks, and then 7 rushing touchdowns and 800 yards rushing, which is fantastic for a quarterback, especially considering sacks come out of your rushing yards total. So great season for him. He had arguably a better season he had more picks last year, less yards. But yeah, a lot more rushing TDs. So either way, great season for him. It's almost like a career achievement award for how well he's done in this career, and his crowning glory, getting the Heisman. Conference Championship Players of the Week: Garyon Conley, 3 tackles, 2 picks in Ohio State's victory over Nebraska. Myles Gaskin, 4 touchdowns and over 200 yards in Washington's victory over UCLA. ACC, just our 2 players of the game: Quadri Olison, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns for us offensively, and Sean Wolfgang, 3 sacks defensively. So those were your ACC offensive and defensive players of the game. Now, here's what we really want to get into. Here's the top 25. Oh, and for those of you that are wondering, Ohio did win over Toledo to bring in the MAC Conference Championship. But this is what we're really interested in. Washington, LSU, Oklahoma, Georgia, Notre Dame, Pitt, Ohio State, UCLA. Those are your top 8 teams. They all have 1 loss or fewer. and they're kind of the only teams really with a shot at making the college football playoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of run through their resumes here. That's the coaches poll as it stands, and I'll do a quick little scroll through the coaches poll so you can take a look. Clemson fell down to 13th after losing to us. Houston down to 21st. UCLA went down to 8th after losing. You can see there's your others receiving votes. UCLA went down to 8th after losing to Washington. Washington actually jumped up to number 1. And we're going to switch over to the BCS rankings, because if the BCS was in charge, Washington would be the 1 seed, LSU would be the 2 seed, Oklahoma would be the 3 seed, and the BCS has Notre Dame as the 4, has Georgia as the 5, Pitt as the 6, Ohio State as the 7, UCLA as the 8. But as you know, NCAA is very finicky when it comes to ranking teams, and it prioritizes losses in very weird fashions. Like Georgia lost really early, I think, so that helps them out as far as the way things end up going. And teams that were ranked high originally just stay high. Like Notre Dame is ranked ahead of us even though we beat them, things of that nature. So we're going to go through the teams' resumes quickly here and just talk about who should get in, who shouldn't. If we look at Washington to start off with, number 1, they just blew out everybody to start the season. Probably their only close games were like USC and Cal right here in this middle stretch. And then blew out Stanford. Blew out UCLA in the championship game. Blew out a bunch of teams here along the way. I mean, they're probably, in my opinion, the number 1 seed. They have like the number 2 defense, number 2 offense. They're just overall unbelievable. Look at their offensive players. Browning's been incredible. Myles Gaskin's been fantastic. So some really good players there. LSU, they've been more of a rushing team. You can see their quarterback's only thrown for 1,600 yards. 23 TDs, though. But Geis has 1,600 yards. I think Smith has like 500 yards rushing. Brissett has like 500 yards rushing as well. And if you look at their schedule, though, a lot weaker in the early going, especially. Not a ton of high-quality opponents. They did beat Bama easily. They just escaped Auburn, and then a pretty clinical win over Tennessee in the SEC championship game for LSU. Oklahoma, the final unbeaten. You can see they had a lot of tight games here. They also didn't play a conference championship game, so that hurts them. Look at these tight battles, though. They did win a couple of big ranked games here against Tennessee and against Texas. LSU beat Tennessee arguably better. Look at that. One possession victories here. Not a ton of high-quality opposition for Oklahoma. They got some good players, though. Kyler Murray, of course, is leading them in the passing game. He's also ran for, I think, 600 or 700 yards and like 10 touchdowns as well. So he, honestly, I'm surprised he wasn't more in the Heisman race. Probably his interceptions was what hurt him there. They've also still got Joe Mixon, so fantastic team that the Sooners have, but I don't think they have a case for anything higher than 3rd. So you're probably looking at your 1 and 2 is either Washington or UCLA. Oklahoma's probably locked into that 3rd spot. That leaves the 4th position open, and that's where you have Notre Dame, Pitt, Ohio State, and UCLA. I left Georgia out because, A, they didn't win their conference. I know Notre Dame's not in a conference, and UCLA didn't win their conference, but Georgia, especially, if you look at their resume and the teams they've played against, they've played nobody. Their only teams they've played against was Auburn, who's ranked number 25. They barely beat them. They've also got a ton of other close victories. Look, it's Vandy, Florida, Georgia Tech took them to overtime, Mizzou, all these close games. And then their only other ranked, I guess they beat ranked BYU early on in the season, but their only other ranked opponent was Tennessee at home, and they got smoked. So I think Georgia just doesn't have a case for the playoff. But that leaves Notre Dame, Pitt, Ohio State, UCLA. We'll start in kind of the order of just how the NCAA has it ranked right now. Notre Dame, of course, they've been very good. If they had a conference championship game, I think they might be the team to get in because they smoked Louisville, who's number 10 right now in the BCS. They beat Texas pretty handily. They beat another ranked team in Florida State. They beat a ranked team in Stanford, and their only loss came to us, who is a very, very high-quality team, a very good opponent. They've also, the rest of their schedule beyond those 4 games, though, very weak. Their other wins are all against teams with like 4 wins or less. So they're kind of an interesting school in the way that they've fared. Kaiser's been incredible for them. Look at 28 TDs to 2 picks. So he's been very, very good. Notre Dame's been very good, but their lack of conference championship game probably hurts them as well as their loss to us. Now, if we look at, we'll go to UCLA, and then we'll look at who I think my two favorites are in Pitt and Ohio State. UCLA, like I mentioned, if they had beat Washington, of course they'd be undefeated, they'd be in. But with that loss, they only have one ranked win. It was against Stanford in overtime. And the rest of their schedule, look at this, 3-win team, 5-win team, 4-win team, 5-win. I mean, you can only play the teams that you're dealt, but they weren't exactly killing them. Look at this, two possession, 17 points to 3 possession. 2 possession game there, 2 possession game there. They blew out Washington State, who stinks, blew out Cal, but tight game with Nevada. They weren't killing teams, barely beat Colorado. They just don't have an impressive resume. It's not their fault the Pac-12 kind of stunk this year besides themselves and Washington, but that's kind of the breaks there. They didn't win their conference, and so it's tough on them resume-wise. Now, Ohio State versus Pitt. We're going to look at Ohio State here, and the thing with Ohio State to note is their margin of victory. And I looked at the team rankings. They are unbelievable. Their defense is fantastic. Offense very well balanced, scores a lot. And if you look at them, they beat teams pretty handily. Virginia Tech, they beat by 6. Illinois, they beat by 13. But otherwise, I think those were their only 2 wins closer than 18 points or 20 points. They beat Rutgers here by 18. Otherwise, every other win was by 20 or more points, which is unbelievable that they just killed teams. Now, the couple tough things for them is they don't have a lot of huge statement wins. Their highest ranked win is against the number 19 team. Now, granted, they blew them out of the water, but they blew out number 19, number 24, and they beat number 23. Their highest ranked team they played was Penn State, who they lost to by 17 points. Granted, it was on the road, but we played Penn State, and we beat them, albeit at home and in overtime. But when you look at common opponents, we have, kind of the leg up there, although Ohio State's been very, very dominant. And just to look at their team, of course, Joe Burrow led them this season. Interestingly enough, Dwayne Haskins actually had to come in the conference championship game. Joe Burrow got hurt in the first quarter after throwing 2 touchdowns. That's why he only has 10 passes thrown there. And Haskins came in and actually threw 2 touchdowns himself in the victory. They've also got Mike Weber, who's been fantastic. Paris Campbell, their leading receiver. Now for Pitt, if we look at our leaders there, of course, we got Kenny Pickett. Darren Hall's our leading rusher. We don't know if he'll be able to play come playoff time. We're hopeful for that. Quadri Olson, of course, is our other leading rusher. He's at 1,250 yards, so he's just behind Darren Hall right there as well. Sean Wolfgang actually leads the country in sacks as well with 15. Now, if you look at our schedule, ranked-wise, we have 3 ranked wins. Number 16, Penn State, who Ohio State lost to. Number 4, Notre Dame, who's in the running with us. We beat them in South Bend. And we beat number 13, Clemson, in the ACC championship game in very dominating fashion. We've also got wins over teams that were ranked in Virginia Tech. BC was 8-4 this year. We beat them handily, blew both of them out. We beat UCF, who's bowl eligible. Georgia Tech is bowl eligible. We have a Miami, who's bowl eligible and was in the ACC championship game last year. And talent-wise, they're very good. So we have a lot of high-quality wins here. Now, we did lose to Louisville, who Notre Dame beat, but counterpoint, we beat Notre Dame. So that's kind of the interesting thing there. We also have a conference championship to our name. We beat Clemson for the ACC title, so that's always supposed to help teams as far as the way resumes are considered. So with that said, I'm leaving 2 links in the discussion or in the description of this video. I'll also put them in the comments. Let me know in the comments who you think should be the 4 playoff teams and in what order. And vote in the 2 polls that I'm going to link in the comments and in the description for the 2 votes. The first vote is going to be the kind of 1, 2, 3 seeds. LSU, Washington, Oklahoma. Washington, LSU, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Washington, LSU. What order should they be in? And then the second poll is who should get the number 4 seed. Because I think those unbeatens are definitely 1 through 3. Who should get the 4 seed? Notre Dame, Pitt, Ohio State, or UCLA. So that's what we're considering here, guys. The playoff special. You guys get to help be the committee. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. The next video will reveal who the 4 teams making the college football playoff are. It'll be a little bit of a preview episode, as well as we'll look at those potential matchups and talk about what is to come for the end of this season. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care.